Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Hey, Jamie Battles. I feel bad that I missed Motor Booty this weekend. Seems like it's always a good time had by all. Hey, Karen. Good morning to you. Hope you're doing all right. From the Dirty Lou. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, good morning, friends. How are you? Hope you're doing well this morning. Of course, I'm outside and we got an airplane, so, well. Hello, hello. Hope it's going well. That this day treats you beautifully. Driving very good. Hope it goes well. All right. Well, good morning, friends. Let's get going this morning. It is. Hey, Vicky, good morning to you. All right. It is the third day of September on Tuesday at 11:11, and I'm glad you're here with me. That you might find yourself together with this little band and this little crew of folks who come together to follow and be a part of the 11:11 experience that always takes us different places and different times. And today's a little different as well. And so, hey, good morning, Jane and John. How are you? That this morning we find ourselves that it is a beautiful morning here, a beautiful September morning, and as you can see back there, it was a motorcycle morning. I get to ride the bike to work this morning, which is always great. But I'm out here kind of sitting on the bike because I wanted to because I think there's a few things about riding motorcycle that's a little bit like the life of faith, and I always find that one for me actually helps the other, and so today on this Tuesday I just wanted to share with you a little bit of my reflections around what it is to ride, and because I think. For me, it really has been something that has, not everybody thinks about, I think, riding a motorcycle this way, but it has been a thing that has brought me not just joy, not like it's fun, or not just, you feel good, or get your wind in your hair, or whatever, or your beard in my case, but there are certain things, there are certain kind of primal things that it brings you to, and certain awarenesses that if you don't respect while you're riding motorcycle, can get you in trouble. And I think it's true of the spiritual life as well. So one of them is that there's simply a sense of when you're riding a bike that you have to ride defensively. Now I know that seems like an obvious thing, but there's really this deep reality of riding that where you can be right. There's plenty of times here where I'll be merging onto the highway, or I'll be coming off, or there'll be somebody that's supposed to yield and they don't. And I have at that point I have an option. I can be right and continue to ride and get run over and turned into so much ground beef on the highway, or I can actually give some deference to the person, to the person that is out there, and that may be misbehaving, that may be not doing all the things they're supposed to do, that may be not following the rules of the road. But on a motorcycle, you are actually more vulnerable than surrounded in your little, riding Barca Lounger of steel that we all generally ride around in when we ride around in cars. But I think this is also true of the spiritual life, that when one of the things that we encounter is that we're all actually way more vulnerable we're actually way more susceptible to the right things and the wrong things of the world. And that when we set ourselves up in such a way to be right in the world, where we can be, and we can be right. We could be, morally correct, factually correct, all sorts of things, ways in which we can be correct about any given thing. But at the same time, as if we're on a motorcycle trying to merge, we can be right, we can have the right of way. But if we drive if we drive it to conflict, we are going to lose. We're going to lose something very valuable to us, maybe even our lives. And I think, too, particularly this era that we find ourselves, this notion that we might just drive a little defensively, that we might actually live our lives in this way in which, not that we're trying to turtle up and protect ourselves, but that we can consciously extend grace even when people are misbehaving, even when they're trying to merge and they're trying to move us over, and we need to move over. Now on a bike, it's really obvious that you need to do these things, because if you don't do those things, you'll end up on the pavement. But in the world, in our spiritual lives, we'll also find ourselves ground up. We'll also find ourselves beat up. We'll also find ourselves hurt or broken in ways that our relationships might never even know and might never even be aware of, if we don't open ourselves up to simply being able to extend grace to other folks on the road. So that's one thing, that the vulnerability you feel. I'll let him go here. The vulnerability that you feel when you end up on a bike also extends to the way in which it operates even when you ride as well. That one of the things that happens, and it's always kind of the trick of the new rider, all new riders do this, that you end up kind of looking over at something like, oh, look, shiny. And then all of a sudden you find yourself pointed in that direction. We find ourselves pointed, if you're riding and you kind of get transfixed by something off to your left, you will inevitably find yourself drifting off to the left. That in fact, where you look on a motorcycle is often where you'll go. That if you see a pothole in front of you, it takes a bit of an experienced rider's kind of discipline to notice this. You can get transfixed by that pothole, and then you'll drive right into the pothole. It kind of happens. And even though that's what you want to avoid, and you're looking at the thing, but as long as you keep looking at the thing that you want to avoid, you'll keep driving towards it. That so much more often on a motorcycle than even when driving. Driving where we use a little less balance. We don't have to lean into our car to make it go around a corner. But on a bike, it's much more responsive to where our body is and where our attention is, and where we're placing our eyes and our ears and our senses actually is where we end up going. In the spiritual life, in our walk with God, we end up, it's not that different. What we end up looking at, what we end up filling our consciousness with, what we end up putting in our heart, what we end up doing with our bodies and in repeated fashions, those things that we give our attention to and our patterns to, that's where we go. And so, Jesus' scripture is filled with notions of cautions about what we put in our eyes, if a hand offends you, cut it off. He's not talking about doing surgery on ourselves. He's talking about this notion of if you've got a repeated action that you're into, and that if that action is taking you away from the good, the true, and the beautiful in your life, you stop the action, because where you look, is where you'll end up going. And that that the spiritual life, just like a motorcycle, requires a little balance in us. It requires us to ride in such a way that brings us a little more into accord with the world in which we find ourselves, a little less maybe than a car does. So the second thing is that when in our spiritual lives, be attentive to what you're filling your time with, what you're filling your life with, what you're filling your consciousness with, where you're putting your eyeballs. Because where we end up putting our intentions, putting our heart, or putting our eyeballs is really where we'll go. And that so much of life is really not about what we've done in the past, not, the road behind us is exactly that. The road behind us, it has no effect on us. And the road ahead of us is that too. It's the road ahead of us. It's up there. It will greet it in some fashion or other, but we have not yet found its way there. What matters is as we ride is kind of the trajectory upon which the line in which we take, the way in which, when you're cornering on a motorcycle, you lean into it, and there's a way in which to take a corner that has a particular arc around it, a particular trajectory, and that if you stare at the ground where you are, you'll actually miss the apex of the corner. If you look at the mirror behind you, you'll miss the appropriate turn. That it actually requires us to look a little bit forward, but not too far. And I think this too maybe is the last of the thing, or kind of the last of the things I want to share to you today, that is a little bit about our journey of riding. Because our life and our intention and our trajectory, our apex on a corner turn, requires us to lean into it. It requires us to, like racers will talk about committing to a turn, and that when you commit. Like bike racers will talk about committing to a turn, because there's a commitment in it, and there's a commitment to the trajectory of our life that we have to lean into our lives. There's a physicality, there's a body, there's so much. We want to just kind of putt around. Often, I think we want to putt around just enough to get around, so that we. But that actually becomes the most treacherous. The most often the time you'll more often fall over is when you're going slow than going fast. So that I hope you'll consider these three things as you consider your life, and these little parallels that have taught me something, not just about kind of how to ride a motorcycle, but how to be a part of the journey with God and the journey toward God is my life. That we might in our lives, really in our relationships and in our encounters with other people, and even in our encounters with God, that we might drive a little defensively, understanding that the damage that we do might be way more, it might be as just as tragic to somebody else as it is to us. That we might have the willingness and the courage and the ability to ride in such a way that we are attentive to where we're looking, so that when we look, we understand that's where we're going. And if we're looking at things that are going to destroy us, if we're looking at things that are going to destroy the world, if we're looking at things that are going to destroy our relationships, or filling our hearts with those things, or filling our actions with those things, that we recognize we can look someplace else. We don't have to look at every pothole in our life, but we can actually look to the side of it and steer around it, and not drive into all the holes, or all the things that would, or all the shiny, or all the sexy that would carry us away. And then lastly, that we can understand that this life that we live requires a commitment from us. It requires us to lean in, that it is a bodily practice every day, that as we wake up and we slip our little furry bunny slippers on and we paddle down the hall, that there is something that this day will call us to lean into, just as we have to lean into a corner and commit to it with our very weight and our very being, trusting that the centrifugal force will hold us up, trusting that the way in which the world is ordered will in fact hold us together, and that in all these ways and all of this stuff and all of this leaning into this riding is actually taking us towards God's love and God's grace and God's hope and God's beauty for us, and so that we might commit to the trajectory of our lives, to where it's going. So that's my hope for you, and I just wanted to share a little bit of what is on this beautiful day to share a little bit of what it is that I've learned from my journeys on the bike, and maybe they can be a part of yours too. Peace and grace to you, my friends, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 1111.